In the dark heart of a ritual, beneath a sky thick with stars, a blade of black glass glides across human skin. Blood flows. The cut is clean. The tool? Not metal, not iron, not steel. It is obsidian, volcanic glass, sharp beyond belief. This is no myth. This is no exaggeration. In the ancient Maya world, obsidian knives could slice through flesh as easily as modern scalpels. Some say they could cut through steel. Could they? And if so, how did a civilization without metal forging create weapons so sharp they defy belief? The answer lies in a world of ritual, war, trade, and secrets carved from stone. This is the story of obsidian weapons in the Maya civilization. Not just tools, but instruments of power, faith, and fear. It is a tale of science hidden in ritual, of edges so fine they vanish under a microscope, of a people who mastered nature's sharpest gift long before the age of metal. What made these blades so dangerous? Who wielded them? And why did their legacy fade even as their cutting power remained unmatched for centuries? To understand this, we must step into a world without metal, without iron, without the clang of blacksmiths' hammers, a world where the sharpest edge came not from fire and ore, but from fire and rock. A world where the Maya ruled vast cities, built towering pyramids, and practiced rituals that shaped their destiny. And at the center of it all, obsidian, black as night, sharp as truth. Let us begin not with a king, not with a war, but with a stone. The Maya did not have metal tools. They did not smelt iron. They did not forge steel. Their world was built of wood, stone, and lime. Yet they created weapons so sharp they could open a man's chest with a single stroke. These were not swords of iron. They were blades of obsidian, volcanic glass formed when lava cools too fast to form crystals. When broken just right, obsidian fractures into edges thinner than a human hair. These edges are not just sharp, they are the sharpest cutting tools ever made by human hands. Archaeologists have measured obsidian blades for Maya sites. Some edges are only 3 nanometers wide. That is 3 billionths of a meter. A surgical scalpel today is about 30 to 100 nanometers wide. This means ancient Maya obsidian blades were up to 30 times sharper than modern steel scalpels. In laboratory tests, obsidian can cut through steel wool, thin metal sheets, and ballistic gel with ease. Under a microscope, the cut edges are smoother than those made by steel. There is no jagged tear. There is only a clean, precise line. But the Maya did not use these blades to cut steel in battle. They used them for war, sacrifice, and daily life. They cut flesh. They opened bodies. They carved wood. They shaved hair. They were tools of life and death, and their sharpness was not just a matter of skill. It was sacred. The Maya lived in a region rich with volcanic activity. The land that is now southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador was shaped by fire. When volcanoes erupted, they left behind rivers of lava. As the lava cooled, it formed obsidian. Not all obsidian is the same. Its color, clarity, and sharpness depend on the minerals in the lava and how fast it cooled. The best obsidian came from a few key sources. The most famous was El Chayal, near modern-day Guatemala City. Another was Ixtepeque, farther east. A third was San Martin Ixtepeque in the highlands. These places were not just quarries, they were holy sites. The Maya believed obsidian was a gift from the gods. Obsidian was not mined like metal. It was collected from the surface or dug from shallow pits. The stone was brittle. It shattered easily. But this brittleness was its strength. When struck with another stone, obsidian breaks in a special way. It fractures conchoidally, meaning it splits into smooth, curved surfaces with razor edges. This natural property allowed the Maya to shape it without grinding or polishing. A skilled craftsman could turn a lump of obsidian into a deadly blade in minutes. The tools used to shape obsidian were simple. A hammerstone, usually made of basalt or another hard rock, was used to knock off large flakes. Then, a softer tool, often made of deer antler or hardwood, was used to press smaller flakes away. This technique is called pressure flaking. It required precision. One wrong move could ruin the blade. The best craftsmen were highly respected. They passed their skills from father to son. Their work was not just craft. It was art. It was ritual. Obsidian weapons came in many forms. The most common was the prismatic blade. These were long, straight, triangular flakes about the size of a finger. They were not used alone. They were set into wooden or bone handles. These composite tools were called macanao in some Maya languages. When set in rows, they formed slashing weapons like swords or clubs lined with glass teeth. Another form was the projectile point. Obsidian arrowheads and spear tips were deadly. They could pierce hide, wood, and even thin armor. Unlike flint or chert, obsidian holds a sharper edge. It cuts deeper. It causes more damage. Warriors prized these weapons. Kings collected them as symbols of power. Then, there were the sacrificial blades. These were often larger, more carefully made. Some were polished to a mirror shine. Others were carved with glyphs or images of gods. These were not for war. They were for ritual, for bloodletting, for human sacrifice. Blood was sacred to the Maya. They believed it carried life force. It fed the gods. It kept the world turning. Kings and priests cut themselves to offer blood. They pierced their tongues, ears, or genitals with obsidian lancets. These small, sharp tools left precise wounds. The blood was collected on bark paper and burned. The smoke carried the offering to the heavens. Human sacrifice was also part of this system. Captured warriors, slaves, or chosen victims were taken to temple tops. There, a priest would slice open their chest with an obsidian knife. The heart was removed while still beating. This act was not murder. It was devotion. It was duty. The blade used was often a large bifacial knife, wide, heavy, and honed to a lethal edge. These knives have been found in tombs, offerings, and temple caches. Some are over 30 centimeters long. All are terrifyingly sharp. The Maya did not work in isolation. They were part of a vast trade network that spanned the rugged terrain of Mesoamerica. This network was not built overnight. It grew over centuries. It linked highland volcanoes to lowland cities. It connected forests, rivers, and mountains. Obsidian, black, sharp, and life-giving, moved along these paths. It traveled hundreds of kilometers. It reached Tikal, deep in the Petén rainforest. It reached Copan, nestled in a narrow valley. It even reached the smallest farming villages far from any city. Tikal, one of the greatest Maya cities, lies more than 100 kilometers from the nearest volcanic source. No natural obsidian exists in the limestone bedrock of the central lowlands. Yet archaeologists have uncovered thousands of obsidian tools in its plazas, temples, and homes. Blades, projectile points, and bloodletters, all made of volcanic glass. How did they get there? The answer lies in trade. The Maya economy was not primitive. It was complex. Goods flowed in a web of exchange. Farmers traded maize and beans. Craftsmen traded cloth, pottery, and tools. Elites exchanged jade, feathers, and cacao. And at the heart of it all was obsidian, light, durable, and deadly. Obsidian was easy to transport. It did not rot. It did not bend. It could be broken into small uniform flakes. These flakes were called prismatic blades. They were made by a skilled craftsman at the source. Using pressure flaking, they removed long, straight, razor-sharp pieces from a prepared core. One core could yield 20 to 30 blades. These blades were not finished tools. They were raw material. They were like modern razor blades, ready to be mounted, used, and replaced. Craftsmen in the highlands produced these blades in large numbers. At sites like El Chayal and Ixtepeque, workshops have been found. Archaeologists uncovered cores, waste flakes, and broken tools. The scale was industrial. Some workshops produced thousands of blades. These were bundled, tied with plant fiber or wrapped in cloth. Some bundles held hundreds of blades. They were light. A single porter could carry enough to arm a village. These bundles moved through a chain of exchange. Local traders brought them to market towns. There they were passed to long-distance merchants. These merchants knew the routes. They knew the dangers. They traveled in groups for safety. They crossed rivers on rafts. They walked narrow trails through dense jungle. They climbed steep highland passes. They paid tolls at city gates. They gave gifts to rulers. Some obsidian moved as tribute. When a city was defeated, it had to send goods to its conqueror. Obsidian was often part of the payment. It was a sign of submission. It was also a way for powerful rulers to control supply. Kings in Tikal, Calakmul, and Karakol demanded tribute. They stored obsidian in palace warehouses. They gave it to warriors. They used it in rituals. Gift-giving also played a role. Rulers exchanged obsidian as a sign of alliance. A king might send a bundle of fine blades to a neighboring lord. The gift was not free. It created obligation. It built loyalty. It strengthened ties. In return, the other ruler might send cacao, jade, or textiles. We know this not just from ruins and carvings. We know it from science. In the 20th century, archaeologists developed a method called X-ray fluorescence, XRF. This tool can measure the chemical makeup of obsidian. Each volcanic source has a unique mix of trace elements, like zirconium, rubidium, and strontium. These elements act like a fingerprint. By testing ancient blades, researchers can match them to their origin. The results are clear. Obsidian from El Chayal, a major source near modern Guatemala City, has been found in Tikal, Copan, and even the northern Yucatan. Blades from Ixtepeque, farther east, reached as far as the Pacific coast of Chiapas. Obsidian from San Martin Ixtepeque has been identified in Belize and the Petén.
These patterns are not random. They follow political and economic lines. During the Classic period, 250 to 900 CE, control of trade routes meant power. Cities like Tikal and Calakmul fought long wars to dominate them. They built alliances, they broke them, they attacked rivals who blocked access to resources. Obsidian was not just useful, it was strategic. A city with steady access to obsidian could arm its warriors, it could perform blood rituals, it could trade for other goods. A city without it was weak. It had to rely on others. It could be pressured, it could be conquered. The sources themselves were valuable. El Chayal, Ixtepeque, and San Martin Ixtepeque were not open to all. They were controlled by local lords. These lords traded with powerful Maya cities. They may have paid tribute. They may have formed alliances. Some evidence suggests that Tikal had direct influence over Ixtepeque during certain periods. This would have given it a steady supply of high-quality obsidian. But the Maya were not the only players. Far to the west, in the Valley of Mexico, lay Teotihuacan. This was not a Maya city. It was built by a different people. Its language is unknown. Its rulers are unnamed in Maya records. But its power was real. At its peak, Teotihuacan housed over 100,000 people. It was one of the largest cities in the world. Teotihuacan had its own obsidian source, Pachuca. This site produced a rare form of obsidian, green, translucent, and shimmering. It was not just functional, it was beautiful. It was prized across Mesoamerica. Pachuca obsidian has been found in Maya cities like Tikal, Copan, and Caminaljuyu. The presence of green obsidian in Maya lands is not just a trade fact. It is a sign of deep connection. Teotihuacan did not just trade goods, it exported influence. Its architecture, like the talud tablero style of pyramids, appeared in Maya cities. Its gods were depicted in Maya art. Its warriors wore distinctive gear. Around 378 CE, a pivotal event occurred. A figure named Ixtepeque, fire is born, appeared in the Maya lowlands. He is shown in carvings at Tikal and other cities. He wears the costume of Teotihuacan, a goggled headdress like the storm god Tlaoc, a butterfly-shaped shield, and a spear thrower. He carries a flaming torch. He steps over a fallen ruler. On January 16, 378 CE, the king of Tikal, Chaktakichak I, died. The same day, Ixtepeque arrived. He did not become king. Instead, he installed a new ruler, Yaxnun Ahin I. This man had a Mixteca Puebla-style name and foreign features. He was likely a son of a Teotihuacan lord. His rise was not by inheritance. It was by conquest. This was not an isolated incident. Ixtepeque appears in records at other cities. He may have led a military campaign across the region. His actions reshaped Maya politics. Tikal, once a dominant power, now looked to Teotihuacan for support. A new dynasty began. It lasted for generations. With this change came new tools. After 378 CE, a new type of obsidian blade appears in Tikal. These blades are longer, thinner, and more uniform than earlier Maya types. They match the style of blades made at Teotihuacan. They were likely brought by Ixtepeque's army or produced by craftsmen trained in Teotihuacan methods. The Maya did not reject these blades. They adopted them. They learned the techniques, and in time, they made their own versions. The prismatic blade technology improved. Blades became more standardized. Workshops in the Maya area began producing high-quality flakes that matched the Teotihuacan standard. This was not just about sharper tools. It was about power. The arrival of Ixtepeque showed that control of military technology could change kingdoms. Obsidian was no longer just a material. It was a weapon of statecraft. It was a symbol of foreign dominance. It was a tool of revolution. Teotihuacan's influence did not last forever. By 550 CE, the great city began to decline. Its central district was burned. Its monuments were abandoned. The reasons are unclear: internal revolt, invasion, or environmental stress. But its legacy lived on. In the Maya world, the changes it sparked endured. The use of standardized obsidian blades continued. The political model of strong, centralized rule spread. Cities like Tikal rebuilt their power. They fought new wars. They traded new goods. But the memory of Teotihuacan remained. Even after Teotihuacan fell, Pachuca obsidian still moved south. Traders kept the routes open. Maya rulers still valued the green stone. It appeared in royal tombs. It was used in elite rituals. Its presence signaled connection to a lost empire. The trade in obsidian also reveals another truth. The Maya were not isolated. They were part of a larger world. They knew of distant lands. They traded with people who spoke different languages. They adapted foreign ideas. They made them their own. Obsidian was not just a tool. It was a thread in a vast fabric of exchange. It linked mountains to jungles. It linked rulers to warriors. It linked life to death. And it linked one civilization to another. The story of obsidian trade is not just about movement. It is about meaning. A blade made in the highlands could be used in a sacrifice at Tikal. It could kill an enemy in battle at Calakmul. It could heal a wound in a village in the Yucatan. Its journey was long. Its purpose changed, but its sharpness remained. And in every cut, there was a story of distance, of power, of connection. This was the world of the Maya, not isolated, not primitive, but deeply woven into the life of a continent. And at the edge of it all, obsidian, black and bright, carried by hands that knew no steel, but knew the value of a sharp blade.
The Maya did not see obsidian as just a material. They saw it as alive. It came from the earth. It was born of fire. It had spirit. In their cosmology, the underworld was dark and jagged, like obsidian. The sun god battled through it every night. Obsidian was linked to death, war, and rebirth. Gods were associated with obsidian. One was Tlaloc, the rain god, worshipped in Teotihuacan and adopted by some Maya. He was linked to caves, water, and sacrifice. Another was the jaguar god of the underworld. He wore jaguar skin and carried a knife. Some depictions show him with an obsidian blade. Kings linked themselves to these gods. They performed bloodletting rituals to prove their divine connection. They used obsidian to cut themselves. The pain was real. The blood was real. The act proved their worth. Inscriptions describe rulers piercing their penises or tongues. The blood was offered to ancestors. It ensured good harvests. It maintained cosmic order. One famous example is Lady Shak of Yaxchilan. A carved lintel shows her pulling a rope through her tongue. Blood drips into a bowl. Her husband, King Shield Jaguar, holds a torch over the blood. The scene is detailed. The rope is studded with obsidian shards. The pain is visible in her face. This was not performance, it was duty. Obsidian was also used in healing. Maya doctors used it to make small cuts. They drained bad blood. They inserted herbs. The sharpness reduced pain and infection. Some blades found in burials may have been medical tools. The line between ritual and medicine was thin. The sharpness of obsidian is not a myth. It is a fact confirmed by science. In the 1990s, medical researchers in the United States conducted tests on obsidian blades. They used them in surgical procedures on animals. The results were clear. Obsidian scalpels made cleaner cuts than steel ones. The edges of the wounds were smoother. There was less tissue damage. Healing happened faster. Scarring was minimal. Under a microscope, the incision made by obsidian showed no ragged tearing, only a precise split in the cells. Some modern surgeons still use obsidian. It is not common, but in delicate operations like eye surgery or facial reconstruction, where every micrometer matters, obsidian offers a rare advantage. Its edge is so fine it parts skin and tissue without crushing the surrounding cells. This reduces inflammation. It speeds recovery. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has even approved obsidian scalpels for certain medical uses. But could obsidian cut steel? Yes, but only in a very specific way. Obsidian cannot chop through a steel beam. It cannot survive a heavy blow. It is too brittle. If struck hard, it shatters. But when used with precision, it can slice thin metal. Laboratory tests have shown that a well-made obsidian blade can cut through steel wool, aluminum foil, and thin sheets of soft steel. The edge is so narrow, sometimes less than 5 nanometers wide, that it separates the metal fibers without bending or crushing them. It does not cut steel like a saw. It glides through it like a needle through thread. This is not magic, it is physics. The sharper the edge, the less force it takes to penetrate a material. A dull knife crushes and tears. A sharp one parts cleanly. Obsidian, when flaked correctly, forms an edge so thin it is nearly invisible under a light microscope. Only electron microscopes can see it fully. But this does not mean the Maya used obsidian to cut steel in battle. Steel did not exist in their world. The Maya lived in a time before metal tools. They had no iron, no bronze, no steel. Their weapons clashed not with metal armor, but with cotton, wood, and hide. Their enemies wore thick cotton armor. This was not simple cloth, it was quilted. Layers of cotton were soaked in water and dried. This made it stiff. It could stop a dart or arrow. It was light. It allowed movement. But it could not stop obsidian. An obsidian blade could slice through wet cotton like air. It could pierce skin beneath. It could open arteries. It could sever tendons. A single strike from an obsidian-edged weapon could disable or kill. The Maya used several types of weapons. The atlatl, or spear thrower, was one of the most effective. It was a wooden rod with a hook at one end. A dart tipped with an obsidian point was placed on the hook. When thrown, the atlatl acted as a lever. It increased the speed and force of the dart. These darts could fly over 100 meters. They could pierce armor. They were used in war and in hunting. Thrusting spears were also common. These had long wooden shafts and large obsidian tips. Warriors used them in close combat. They aimed for the chest or neck. The obsidian point would enter easily, but it might break on bone. This was a risk, yet the damage done before the break was often enough. Daggers made of obsidian were carried by elite warriors and priests. These were not slashing weapons. They were for stabbing. Some were small, only a few centimeters long. Others were large, like short swords. They were held in wooden or bone handles. The obsidian was set into grooves and secured with resin or cord.
One of the most feared weapons was the obsidian-edged club. This was not a blunt tool. It was a wooden shaft lined with sharp obsidian flakes. The flakes were set in rows, like teeth. When swung, the club did not crush. It sliced. It could open deep wounds. It could cut through muscle and bone. Spanish accounts from later centuries describe similar weapons used by the Aztecs. They called them macuahuito. These were so sharp they could decapitate a horse with one blow. But the Maya did not use macuahuito in the same way. Their versions were different. The Maya embedded obsidian into the sides of wooden clubs, but the design was less standardized. The blades were not always replaceable. They were often fixed in place. The style varied from city to city. Some clubs had long, straight blades. Others used small triangular flakes packed tightly together. The brittleness of obsidian was its greatest weakness. It could not withstand heavy impact. A blow against a rock, a shield, or a skull could chip or shatter the edge. In battle, a warrior could not rely on one blade for long. After a few strikes, it might need to be replaced. To solve this, warriors carried extra blades. They stored them in pouches or belts. Some weapons were designed with multiple blades. If one broke, the next one took its place. Craftsmen made blades in standard sizes so they could be swapped easily. This system was practical. It was efficient. It kept the weapon deadly. Despite its fragility, obsidian had one great advantage. It was always sharp. A freshly flaked obsidian edge was sharper than any steel blade. Metal tools dull over time. They must be sharpened. Obsidian, once flaked, was already at peak sharpness. No grinding or honing was needed. The first cut was the sharpest cut. This made obsidian ideal for rituals. In bloodletting ceremonies, precision mattered. A clean cut meant less pain. It meant better control. Kings and queens used small obsidian lancets to pierce their tongues, ears, or genitals. The blood was collected on bark paper and burned. The smoke carried the offering to the gods. For human sacrifice, larger knives were used. These were often made of high-quality obsidian. Some were polished to a glossy finish. Others were carved with glyphs or images of gods. The most important sacrifices took place on temple tops. A priest would slice open the chest of a captive. The heart was removed while still beating. The obsidian knife had to be strong enough to cut through skin, muscle, and rib. It had to be sharp enough to make a quick, deep incision. A dull tool would fail. A broken one could bring shame. The success of the ritual depended on the blade. This is why obsidian was stored with care. In royal tombs, archaeologists have found bundles of blades wrapped in cloth. Some were placed in wooden boxes. Others were buried with warriors. At the site of Copan, a tomb contained over 300 prismatic blades. At Tikal, caches of obsidian were found beneath temple floors. These were offerings. They were also reserves. The knowledge of how to make these blades was passed down through generations. Master flint knappers trained apprentices. They taught the right angle to strike, the right pressure to apply, the right type of hammerstone to use. This was not guesswork. It was skill built over years. But this knowledge did not survive the arrival of the Spanish. In the 1500s, European conquistadors brought steel swords. These were different from anything the Maya had seen. Steel was tough. It could be resharpened many times. It could withstand heavy combat. A steel blade might dull, but it would not shatter. The Spanish used Toledo steel. It was flexible. It held an edge. It could slash, thrust, and parry. When Spanish soldiers fought Maya warriors, their weapons had a clear advantage. An obsidian club might cut deep, but a steel sword could block it without breaking. The obsidian would chip. The wood might splinter. The warrior would be left defenseless. Within a short time, obsidian weapons disappeared from use in war. They were no longer practical. The age of metal had begun. The old ways faded. But for over 1,000 years, obsidian ruled. From 1000 BCE to 1500 CE, it was the cutting tool of choice across Mesoamerica. The Maya used it longer and more skillfully than any other group. They shaped it, traded it, and honored it. The Maya classic period reached its height between 600 and 800 CE. This was a time of great achievement. Cities like Tikal, Calakmul, Palenque, and Copan grew into powerful kingdoms. They built towering pyramids that rose above the jungle canopy. They carved stone monuments with detailed inscriptions. They tracked the movements of Venus. They developed a writing system of over 800 glyphs. In these cities, obsidian was everywhere. Workshops produced blades for local use and for trade. Royal courts stored large quantities. Warriors carried obsidian-tipped weapons into battle. Priests used obsidian in rituals. Even common people used it to cut food, scrape hides, and shape wood. At Tikal, one of the largest Maya cities, archaeologists have found evidence of specialized obsidian workshops. These were located near the city's center. Craftsmen worked with imported cores from El Chayal and Ixtepeque. They produced blades of consistent quality. Some were used locally. Others were sent to allies or given as tribute.
Palenque, in the western lowlands, also had access to obsidian. Though far from the major sources, it received steady supplies through trade. The ruler Pakal the Great was buried with obsidian tools. One was a small knife placed near his hand. Another was a cluster of prismatic blades wrapped in a cloth bundle. These were not for war. They were for the journey to the afterlife. Copan, in modern Honduras, was a center of art and learning. Its rulers were patrons of stonework and writing. Obsidian was used to carve delicate details and sculptures. It was also used in bloodletting rituals. A famous carving shows the king performing a bloodletting ceremony. He pulls a thorn-studded rope through his tongue. At his feet lies a container filled with bark paper. The rope is tied with knots. Some researchers believe the thorns were made of obsidian. These cities did not just use obsidian. They controlled it. They fought for it. They recorded its movement in their inscriptions. Glyphs mention tribute payments that include obsidian. They name rulers who captured enemies and seized their weapons. They celebrate victories that open new trade routes. But around 900 CE, this world began to collapse. The great cities were abandoned.
Pyramids were overgrown by jungle. Monuments stopped being carved. The flow of goods slowed. The reasons are still debated. One major factor was drought. Tree ring data and lake sediment studies show that severe droughts hit the Maya region between 800 and 950 CE. Rainfall dropped by up to 40%. Crops failed. Water sources dried up. People left the cities in search of food. Warfare also played a role. Inscriptions from the late Classic period show increasing conflict. Cities attacked each other more often. Alliances broke down. Rulers were captured and sacrificed. Trade routes were cut. With less access to obsidian and other goods, cities weakened. Overpopulation may have added pressure. Some cities had tens of thousands of people. The land could not support them all. Forests were cleared, soil eroded, food became scarce. Political collapse followed. People lost faith in their rulers. The kings claimed divine power. They said they kept the gods happy. But if the rain stopped and the crops died, their power seemed hollow. Revolts may have occurred. Elites were overthrown. Temples were burned. By 950 CE, most of the great lowland cities were empty. Tikal, once home to 60,000 people, had only a few hundred. Palenque was abandoned. Copan's last king was killed. The stone carvings stopped. Obsidian use did not end, but it changed. Large-scale production ceased. Long-distance trade declined. The fine blades of the Classic period were no longer made in the same numbers. Smaller communities continued to use obsidian for daily tasks, but the royal workshops, the tribute systems, the grand rituals, all faded. In the post-Classic period, 900 to 1521 CE, new powers rose in Mesoamerica. The Toltecs built a capital at Tula. The Aztecs later rose in the Valley of Mexico. Both used obsidian. The Aztecs became especially skilled. They made macuajl, a wooden sword lined with obsidian blades on both edges. These weapons were so effective that Spanish soldiers wrote in awe of them. Bernal Diaz del Castillo, a soldier under Hernán Cortés, described a battle in which an Aztec warrior struck a Spanish horse. The blade cut so deep it severed the animal's head. While this may be an exaggeration, it shows how feared these weapons were. The Spanish recognized their sharpness. But the Maya of the post-Classic period did not adopt the macuajl. Their weapon styles remained different. In the northern Yucatan, cities like Mayapan and Chichen Itza used atlatls, spears, and daggers. Obsidian was still used, but it was not set into swords like in central Mexico. The reasons for this difference are not fully known. It may be due to tradition, it may be due to access to materials. The Maya had their own methods. They did not copy others blindly. Still, the truth remains. Obsidian was the sharpest cutting tool in the ancient Americas. No metal blade from that time could match its edge, and the Maya were among its most skilled users. They did not invent it. Obsidian use began long before the Maya. The Olmecs used it, so did earlier cultures in the highlands. But the Maya refined it. They used it in war, in ritual, in daily life. They traded it across vast distances. They understood its value. When the Spanish arrived, they brought a new world. Steel replaced stone. Guns replaced darts. The old tools vanished. But the legacy of obsidian remained. Today we can still see its power. In a lab, under a microscope, a 1,500-year-old Maya blade reveals an edge finer than any modern scalpel. It does not rust. It does not dull. It sits in silence, waiting. It is not just a piece of rock. It is a record of human skill, of patience, of belief, of a civilization that shaped the sharpest edge the world had ever seen, without ever knowing metal. And in that sharpness we find a truth. Sometimes the most powerful tools are not the heaviest, not the loudest, but the finest, the cleanest, the most precise. The Maya knew this. They held it in their hands. They cut history with it.
Let us return to the question. Could obsidian cut steel? Yes, but with limits. It can cut thin, soft steel. It cannot chop through thick metal. It is not a sword killer. But in the hands of a Maya warrior or priest, it was more than a tool.
It was a bridge between worlds. It opened flesh to feed the gods. It carved wood to build temples. It shaped history. The sharpness of obsidian is not just a physical fact. It is a symbol. It shows how a people without metal could achieve precision beyond modern tools. It shows how ritual and technology were one. It shows how a volcanic glass, formed in fire, became the edge of power. We must not romanticize. The Maya were not mystical. They were practical. They understood their materials. They tested, refined, and improved. They traded. They fought. They bled. They built. And they left behind blades so sharp that even today we pause when we see them. We wonder. We test. We confirm. Yes, they are sharper than steel. But sharpness alone does not explain their power. It was the hand that held the blade, the mind that shaped it, the belief that gave it meaning. In the end, the story of obsidian in the Maya world is not just about a stone. It is about human ingenuity. It is about the choices people make when they lack what others have. The Maya did not have metal, so they used what the earth gave them. They studied it. They mastered it. They turned a brittle rock into the sharpest edge in the ancient world. They did not write their science in books. They wrote it in cuts, in carvings, in blood, in trade routes, in tombs filled with blades. Today we measure their tools with microscopes. We trace their obsidian with chemistry. We reconstruct their lives with fragments. And we find a truth that cuts deep. Sometimes the most advanced technology is not the loudest, not the heaviest, but the sharpest. And sometimes the sharpest edge is not made of metal. It is made of glass. And it came from the heart of a volcano, shaped by hands that knew no steel, but knew precision, power, and purpose. This is the legacy of the Maya obsidian weapon. Sharp enough to cut steel, and sharp enough to cut through time.